I didn't realize that I was in the Supreme frickin' Court here. Should I have my lawyer present for my frickin' trial?
Yeah.
You're listening to Binnall of America Audio.
Damn straight.
And as far as the this database goes, where is this? Is this something like that anybody could go and look through, or is it housed in a certain place? Or can you talk about the actual database, because it sounds like a wealth of information to look at.
Right. Well, what we did is we broke down our files into basically two parts. One are files that we will release to the public, and the other ones are files that we will keep for internal use only because the witnesses themselves have wished to remain anonymous. Mm-hmm. Now, if we can go through the electronic version and actually black out the witness names and privacy information like that, those files will also be made available. So in terms of who can access them right now, they're internal use only, but we're going to make them available to our general membership through our website, at least the public ones. And then for the general public to get access, we're going to have to go through some sanitation because we have to deal with privacy laws and that type of thing.
Yeah, okay. How do you respond to some of the people in ufology that want MUFON to be more politically proactive in sort of like a NICAP way?
Well, that actually is probably not going to happen just because we are a 501(c)(3) nonprofit. And nonprofits really can't take an active political stance for the most part and keep their nonprofit status. So we have to be very sensitive to that.
Okay, so it's just it's more of a matter of just because of the way the MUFON is structured than like a purposeful decision on their part.
Sure, and I think also the other reason would be that it's not really one of our goals. Obviously, we'd like to educate the public, and the public would include public officials and so on. But to fund political action committees or that type of thing, I think that's probably what the Disclosure Project is more set up for. MUFON really is. We like to stick to our major goals.
And so you don't expect any sort of working agreement or anything with the Disclosure Project type group?
I think, well, I guess it would depend on what the working agreement is. I mean, we would support anything that has to do with educating the public, including our government officials. So whatever we can do to facilitate the educational part of that, we would be happy to cooperate with.
Now, this one sort of just sprung into my head, so I'm going to throw it out there. Has anyone in MUFON ever talked about what you guys are going to do if the UFO secret is revealed? Are you like, we're all going to shut down? That's it. It's over. We won. That sort of thing. Or do we have any post-disclosure MUFON type plans?
Well, we're all going to go fishing. No, actually, we have talked about that. In fact, the UFO Research Coalition in our teleconference about a month ago, we discussed. What is our day after plan? And so we're working on that right now. It's not only, disclosure from the government's perspective. It could also be what happens if, for example, SETI announces that they have a signal, or there's a number of different scenarios we could be facing. So we do need to have speaking points and a public reaction plan for that. We are working on that.
Nice. And does MUFON have any sort of it sounds like you have a lot of great case files and that sort of thing. Do you have any sort of, I'm trying to come up with the right word here, like a documentation of the actual history of ufology, sort of like a recognition of certain people within the field, or like anyone who sort of is documenting this as a historical thing?
We have a wealth of historical information. I inherited all the files, and as I was going through them, I just was astounded at how much information we have. So there's a lot of information that's not only about the history of ufology. We have an extensive photo collection. In fact, we just scanned them electronically. I think we had somewhere over 1,000 photos of ufologists from the early days all the way until now of UFO events. We have a wealth of government documents. There's just tons of information. In fact, one of my goals is to beef up our webpage and to put a pretty large section on there that details the history of ufology as well as the history of MUFON.
Nice. That would be awesome. Yeah, that would be great. Now, this is the other sort of tough one. Within the UFO field, there's always that sort of paranoia that exists in general. How do you respond to the there'll always be these suspicions of government infiltration within UFO organizations, and since MUFON is really one of the last few that are left, MUFON obviously will have to bear the brunt of those suspicions. But, people talk about NICAP and what happened with them. How do you respond to just that general suspicion that's out there all the time?
Sure. Well, I mean, like you said, there's always going to be conspiracy theory. There's always going to be some level of paranoia about, what the government's doing or not doing. I think, like the saying in the Bible, you should know them by their fruit. We're hoping that folks see that what MUFON is actively doing now shows that we are being true to our goals and true to our mission. It's one of the reasons why I started the Pandora Project, because when I first joined MUFON, one of my first questions was, well, what happens with all this investigative data that's submitted to headquarters? Where does it go? Is it acted on? Is it looked at? And when I figured out that it was just a big black hole that it was being contributed to, I thought, no, I'm going to have to reverse that.
Yeah.
So that's where Pandora came from. So I think as folks start to see that, MUFON as an organization is becoming more open and also, becoming more embracive of other organizations and cooperating with other organizations and so on, there's always going to be some level of paranoia, like you said, and some level of accusation, but I don't really worry about that. I think most folks will see through that and see that we are true to our mission.
Yeah. So just judge MUFON by what they do, not what you hear, pretty much.
Exactly.
Yeah. So to take me through, in like a state, what the setup of MUFON is. Like there's the state director, and then there's these investigative teams, and then they go and what do people just report their UFO sightings to MUFON, and then they go check it out. Sort of talk about a little bit about how the structure is in these smaller fiefdoms, if you will.
Sure. Well, each state has a state director and an assistant state director, and they're the folks that sort of manage the members in their state, and they're the ones that organize the monthly meetings, if there are monthly meetings or quarterly meetings or whatever.
Yeah.
But then we also have state section directors, so each state is then divvied up by counties, and then there's a section director, and the section director is a field investigator who's responsible for field investigation in his or her area. So that's the way the hierarchy is set up. But then we also have our MUFON members, and a number of our MUFON members are our field investigators themselves. The way that investigations take place is if they're centrally reported to our website automatically sends them to the appropriate field investigator based on proximity. We also copy the state director and the section director, so we make sure that they are actively managing and monitoring those. So we have a real proactive monitoring capability through our what we call our case management system. So even though it's decentralized, there is the centralized reporting and the centralized management of the investigations.
Now, as far as the reporting of cases, is there any working relationship with the National UFO Reporting Center? Because obviously they're getting a ton of UFO reports too.
Sure. Well, we don't have that formal relationship just yet. We have been working with Peter Davenport for a number of years to try to make that happen. We're not sure where he stands right now on that. We're hoping that when somebody reports to the National UFO Reporting Center, that not only he collects the data, but he would pass it on to us so we could actively investigate it. I think it's one of the problems we're dealing with is that there are a number of sites that have sprung out over the internet where folks have report a UFO link or form. People fill it out thinking that, well, somebody's going to actively take a look at that, and then it goes nowhere.
Yeah.
So it's being collected, but again, these are mini black holes is what I call them. Mm-hmm. There's no active investigation. We'd like to form liaisons in relationship with all these folks so they pass on their sightings to us so we can get our investigator corps to work.
When someone goes out and does the investigation, what exactly do they do as far as investigating? Because, like, if you called me and you were like, Tim, we got a UFO sighting in your town, can you go investigate? I wouldn't even know where to begin. So what kind of stuff goes along with the actual investigation?
Sure. Well, to become a field investigator, you have to be trained and you have to take an exam. So we have a set procedures in our field investigator manual that basically says A through Z, this is how an investigation takes place. There are forms that have to be filled out. There's witness information that has to be obtained. There's a witness interview that has to be done. there's a lot of background type work that has to be done in terms of checking the local weather and checking astronomical data, checking with the local airport and Air Force bases and so on to try to figure out, basically what we're trying to do is we want to rule out any natural occurring phenomena or man-made phenomena. And what we end up with is we ask our investigators is once they've done a thorough investigation is to classify the UFO as either an IFO, identified object, or a hoax, if it's a possible hoax, or an unidentified object. Those are the three categories we typically deal with. So they have a set of procedures that they go through to do that.
Okay. Now this one kind of popped up too, and this is sort of I would classify this as a kind of a tough one too, but hopefully you'll understand where I'm coming from. Now, one of the big complaints, I guess, within ufology, and this doesn't really have much to do with MUFON, but I'm wondering how much it does, is that since, like, anybody can sort of follow ufology and work their way up and become a part of ufology, that there tends to be, and I'm going to try and say this the nicest way, crazy people. I don't suspect that MUFON has as many problems as, like some of these forums and other smaller type UFO groups go. But is there sort of any, like, policing of MUFON where if someone's, doing something outrageous that, MUFON can kind of, like, censor them or censure them, you know what I mean?
Sure. Well, I can tell you that, I'll just give you a little history here. Back in the early days of MUFON, we didn't actually accept applications from the general public. You had to know somebody in the organization and be recommended by them to actually join MUFON.
Oh, wow.
Now, that has obviously changed now. We do have open membership, open enrollment. So we do have folks from all backgrounds and all beliefs that join the organization. We don't expect everybody to have to follow the same beat of the drum, but we do want to make sure that if somebody puts on the public face of MUFON and represents MUFON, that they are abiding by all the rules and regulations that we have put down, for example, in our investigative process.
Yeah.
So if you're a field investigator, you've been trained, you've taken an exam, you know what MUFON expects of you, and we hope that you follow that as much as possible. Of course, if there's a red flag that's raised by the public in terms of how investigation was conducted, there's litigation issues that arise, the type of things that we worry about. So we do, try to take a more proactive role to make sure that doesn't happen. So we don't really think that of ourselves as having to censor people or censure, however you want to call it. It's more just making sure we let the folks know what's expected of them and give them the proper guidance and the proper guidelines.
Yeah. I kind of butchered that question, but I think you understood what I meant.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about the MUFON Journal, because that's one of the best UFO publications out there. What's your role with the MUFON Journal? Are you going to be taking over editing, or how is that run by somebody else, or what's that all about?
Well, the current editor is Dwight Connolly, and Dwight has done an excellent job in keeping the journal going and making sure it's a quality publication. We're hoping Dwight will stay on for as long as he can with us.
Okay.
Of course, Dwight is thinking about retirement, and he has some health issues that he's dealing with. But regardless of who the editor is, either now or in the future, we're always going to make sure that the MUFON Journal is a quality publication, and making sure that it meets the needs of not only our members but the general public.
Yeah. Now, can you talk a little bit about the MUFON Journal? Because like some people who are listening are members of MUFON, and they probably have never read it or anything. Maybe you can talk about it and give them an idea of what it is.
Sure. Well, the journal itself is sort of our communications vehicle each month for letting folks know what's happening with the organization, but also really to know what's happening in ufology. So we do put a lot of sighting information that's in there, but we also will put ongoing investigations that we're conducting, some major events that have happened. We have a number of folks that will contribute monthly to the journal, like Stanton Freedom. So a lot of the leading ufologists will go ahead and write articles that are published on a monthly basis. So it is really an excellent information base that we take great pains to make sure the information is accurate and relevant. There's a lot of information out there on the internet right now, and it's relevancy or its reliability is questionable. So we're hoping that we sort of make up for those pitfalls.
And like one of the things that a lot of people in ufology say that ufology needs more of is peer review. Is the MUFON journal sort of an outlet for that kind of peer review, do you think?
No, actually it's not. If you really want to look at a peer-reviewed journal, it's more along the lines of what the Center for UFO Studies does with their journal. Our journal is more for information for the members as well as for the general public on what's happening now. In terms of if we get our research teams, or when we get our research teams off the ground here and we produce some scholarly articles, we may be looking for another journal to publish that in, or even just publish those to the CUFOS journal.
Okay, all right. How long has the MUFON journal been going on for since its inception?
Since its inception, back in the early days, it wasn't called the MUFON journal; it was called Skylook, but it's the continuation of that publication. And
are there any plans to compile these in any sort of collection, like a book or an anthology or anything, for people like me who are like, I'm only 27. I can't. It's hard for me to get my hands on a 73 edition of the MUFON journal, but I'd like to check it out.
Sure. Well, actually, we've taken all of our MUFON journals and scanned them, and they're on CD, so you can actually purchase the entire collection.
Oh, okay.
As well as our symposium proceedings. So everything's available electronically now.
Awesome. Now, you touched on it already here, the MUFON Symposium. Let's talk about that, because that is, if it's not the biggest UFO conference going right now, it certainly is probably the most well-known, and it's had a rich history. And this upcoming one next summer is going to be the 38th annual, I see. Talk about the MUFON Symposium.
Well, we've already picked a theme for the symposium. The theme is the estimate of the situation, the extraterrestrial hypothesis. And it ties in with that workshop that I mentioned earlier. So what we're looking for to do in 2007 is to have a number of folks come and speak to this original theory about what UFOs are. And we're also going to be releasing the findings from our workshop. The symposium itself is really an excellent way for people to get together and not only hear the latest theories or hear the latest information, but also simply to network with their peers. I think a lot of folks come mostly for networking because there are a number of different conferences out there where the same speakers make the rounds, and so a lot of folks may attend those instead. What we're trying to do is make the upcoming symposiums a little more unique in terms of the message that's going to be offered, not the same old stuff, but new findings, new information, stuff that's never been released before, so that folks have an incentive to come.
Awesome. And who's in charge of putting together the conferences? Do you have to take the helm of that, or is that also someone else also in charge of that?
Well, I can tell you what happened, what we did in the past, and how we're going to change it in the future.
Awesome.
In the past, it was a collaborative effort between MUFON headquarters and then the state that would sponsor the symposium for that year. So the symposium tended to move from state to state, and a lot of folks liked that because they could go to something that was regional or local to them. We've since centralized the symposium over the last 3 years in Denver. And we're going to have the next symposium in Denver also, but we are thinking about sort of having a rotation of the symposium in, let's say, among 4 different states into the future. And then we will be collaborating with those states to put the MUFON Symposium on. So for the past 3 years, it's been really a collaboration between MUFON headquarters and the Colorado State MUFON members.
One of the big topics that I've talked about a lot with people, and seems to be my pet peeve lately with UFO conferences, is that they're just, with the exception of the X conference and a few other ones, there really is a dearth of East Coast UFO conferences. Is there a chance we're going to see a MUFON symposium on the East Coast, or some form of an East Coast MUFON conference for the people who are in the Northeast, like New York and the Pennsylvania area and Boston, where I am, that it's really expensive to fly out to all the way across the country for a UFO conference?
Sure. Well, we have thought about having more than one symposium a year. That we haven't really finalized any details on that. But like I said before, what I'd really like to do is go to this rotational symposium where we do it based on geographical area. So one year it's held on the East Coast, another year it's held on the West Coast, and then another year within the heartland. So, that way folks can go to something that's a little more local and not have to spend so much money.
Definitely. Well, hopefully I can throw that out there, and maybe it'll end up in next time you guys are talking about it, because definitely we need more East Coast UFO conferences. We're dying out here.
Sure, I understand.
We talked about a lot of things that you have on the agenda here, this upcoming the workshop next year, and hopefully this college thing and the new PR initiatives that you sort of want to get going for MUFON. What else do you have on the burner here? What's next for you and for MUFON? Obviously, you just took over the job recently, so you're sort of settling in now. But what can we see on the horizon for James Carrion and for MUFON?
Well, I think the next step for us really is to get our research teams off the ground. We have 5 key projects that we'd like to start, and we're looking for funding for that. And I can tell you what they are. We have a history project where we want to answer some questions about where are UFOs from, who are they, why are they here, how long have they been coming, and so on. And we have a travel project. How do they get here from there, wherever there is?
Yeah.
Energy project, where do they get their energy for travel? We have an abduction project. We want to know, are they abducting humans, and so why? We have actually a good amount of data already we've collected on the abduction phenomena. In fact, we have a research project that was done over a 3-year period called the AMP project, the Ambient Monitoring Project, where we basically created this device that would monitor the environment, temperature changes, energy changes, and so on. We put them in abductee homes, and what they would do is, if they had an experience, they would journal about it, and then we want to correlate the experience time with changes that were recorded on these devices. So we've collected this data over a 3-year period. Now we just need to crunch the numbers and publish our results, but we need funding for the statistical analysis that will be done on that. We also had a project that was done a number of years ago called the Abduction Transcription Project, where we went out and got the major abduction researchers who did hypnosis sessions to contribute their session tapes to us, and then we transcribed them, omitting the witness names. So we have a huge database of information about what people have reported as during their abduction experiences that we'd like to start crunching the data on that. We have a communication project, which is how do they communicate with each other and with us. So it's a lot of research. It's time to start taking all this data that's been accumulated and really take a serious in-depth look at it and do what we call data mining and try to extract some important nuggets of information out of it.
That's awesome. Those sound like all very exciting projects. The abduction thing kind of sprung up in the 80s, really, or the late 70s or whatever. Was there much internal debate in MUFON about whether or not to touch the abduction thing? Because abduction sort of is a fringe subject of ufology, and I can see how maybe some of the old school UFO guys would have been like, we're not doing this, and then maybe the new guys won out or something. Was there much discussion on whether or not to touch abductions?
Oh, absolutely. I was looking back through some of the old symposium proceedings, and yeah, there was definitely that old school, new school thought. And it's not only with abductions; it goes way back to when UFOs were first being seen. The old school thought was these are physical craft, and they're probably under intelligent control, but remotely controlled. So when folks started seeing occupants and entities, the old school folks says, no, that can't be possible. So there's always this argument between what we think is the spectrum of the phenomenon. When the spectrum wants to open up a little more wider, the old folks say no, that we can't do that. So we're hoping to have more of an open mind as on all the phenomena, no matter what it is. That's why one thing we're going to be doing is adding more information to our investigations manual and to our investigative website on cattle mutilations and crop circles, stuff that folks have thought, well, it may be UFO related, but maybe not, but they've sort of ignored it. We don't want to ignore any of the data.
Yeah. Is there any sort of like old school versus new school debate going on inside MUFON right now about anything that that, I think you kind of touched on it there with the cattle mutilation and the crop circle thing, that in a few years we'll see more from MUFON, and we'll be like, oh, maybe they must have been debating that a few years ago, whether or not to look
Well, I
at
think, the debates have gone on, but I don't think there's a debate any longer. Right now it's, let's just do it.
Nice.
Let's do the research.
Nice. Sounds good. Tell people how to join MUFON and sort of like give your final pitch here on why they should join MUFON.
Sure. Well, if you want to solve this mystery, the only way to solve the mystery is to investigate sightings and to gather the data and to research the data. That's what MUFON does. We could really use your help if you have any inclination at all to be an investigator, or if you just want to join as a member. And you can do so through our website at www.mufon.com. You can also just call us at 970-221-1836 and sign up over the phone. Right now, MUFON is a membership-based organization, and that's what really keeps our doors open. So we do need members, and we would like to have more members that would not only just generally support us, but also become more involved in investigations. We're getting a number of new sightings each day, and we do need the manpower to investigate those. So, join us and help us out.
And like you said, the website is MUFON.com. The MUFON Symposium this year will be in Denver, Colorado, August 10th to the 12th. You can find out more information about that at MUFON.com. You got plenty of time. Make plans now to get out to Denver for the MUFON Symposium this summer. I'm sure it's going to be awesome. Sounds like it's going to be fascinating. James Carrion, congratulations on the new post. I'm looking forward to seeing what you're going to do in the future. And it sounds like you have a lot of very interesting and inspired initiatives up ahead. And I look forward to talking to you again in the future in a year or so to find out where we stand on some of these projects.
Sounds great, Tim. Thanks for having me on the show.
That does it for this week's edition of Binnall of America Audio. Big thanks to James Carrion for coming on the show. Looking forward to seeing where some of these big plans for MUFON go in the future. You can find out more information on MUFON and James Carrion at www.mufon.com. Moving along now, it's time for Binnall of America Audio listener feedback, and this week's letter comes to us from Dennis, with no hometown listed, so Dennis from parts unknown. Here's what he had to say. Dear Tim, your show rocks. Keep up the great work. Listening to the Serpo story made me think of a guest for your show, and it's one who fits so snugly into the esoteric header, Andy Lloyd. Since you seem so hip to everything out there, you probably know who he is. But if not, I think he is the best Planet X/Nibiru researcher out there, and his website, and now book, Dark Star Theory, is top-notch. Now that I think of it, since I'm personally so interested in the whole disinfo thing, maybe Bruce Rux is not a bad idea either. I don't know anything about him except that his book Hollywood vs. the Aliens, regarding the CIA's participation in UFO disinformation, was really good. Guess that's it for now. Thanks, Dennis. Well, thank you, Dennis, for writing in. Great guest suggestions, and you picked the perfect time to send me a guest suggestion, because right now we're rounding up guests for 2007. I am looking at a stack of books here on my desk, and each one of the authors is ready to go and ready to rock and roll on the show. And I will definitely take a look at Bruce Rux for sure. I'm very interested in that book, Hollywood vs. the Aliens. Sounds fascinating. You're not the first person to suggest Andy Lloyd for the program, so I'll definitely be looking into Andy Lloyd as the new year starts, and hopefully I can catch up to speed on his work, and we can bring him on Binnall of America Audio and discuss Dark Star Theory. Definitely Andy Lloyd and Bruce Rux are potential future guests for Binnall of America Audio. I will put them at the top of the list, Dennis. Thank you for your suggestions, and thanks for writing in. If you would like to be a part of Binnall of America Audio listener feedback, you can simply write to BOAAudio@hotmail.com or click the contact button in the top right-hand corner of the screen at BinnallofAmerica.com. That will get your letter in the mailbag here at Binnall of America Audio. Wrapping it all up, big thanks to Leslie, Chiron, R. Lee, Joe V., and Ralph Molesworth of BinnallofAmerica.com for your help and support with the audio series and the website. 2006 has been a great year for BinnallofAmerica.com, and much of our success would not be possible without the help of the BinnallofAmerica.com staff. BinnallofAmerica.com, make it a part of your everyday search for esoteric news and opinion. If you're a long-time Binnall of America audio listener, an appreciative newcomer, or you just wish you hadn't missed out on Christmas time donations, you can help support the audio series by clicking the PayPal button at binnallofamerica.com and making a donation to help support BOA Audio. Next week on Binnall of America Audio, well, there will be no Binnall of America Audio next week. Folks, for those of you who are longtime listeners of the program, you know that last year, at the conclusion of our Stan Friedman Christmas special, we took a little hiatus, 3 weeks off, to recharge our batteries and cultivate the second half of the season's interviews. We're going to do the same thing this year. You won't be hearing from me again until January 27th, 2007, 4 weeks from today, when we will kick off the second half of Binnall of America Audio Season 2. As I alluded to earlier, I have a stack of books here on the desk. Some of them I've already read, some of them are half done, some of them I haven't even cracked open yet. So we will be taping a ton of interviews in the coming weeks that you'll be hearing beginning January 27th, 2007. In the meantime, in the downtime between now and then, definitely stick around at binnallofamerica.com for daily updates of news, opinion, and satire. I've got a few surprises up my sleeve for the month of January as we build to the return of Binnall of America Audio Season 2. Thank you very much for listening, folks. It's been a great first half of Season 2. It has been an awesome 2006. If it wasn't for the support and readership and listenership of the great binnallofamerica.com audience, this whole operation would cease to be. Thank you very much for your help and support. Have a very safe and happy New Year. I'll be back January 27th, 2007. Until then, this is Tim Binnall, signing off.